Assassin's Creed Shadows has had a very interesting marketing and development cycle, to say the least. And due to numerous delays, I was hoping that once I finally got my hands on the game, which I did last week, I got to play about 5 hours of AC Shadows. I was really hoping that you could feel that extra time and effort and where it's gone into the game. I'm not entirely sure that you can feel that. I'm also not entirely sure this feels different from any of the other recent Assassin's Creed releases. But I also don't know if that's a bad thing. Let me know any questions you have about the game in the comments down below, and I'll get back to you. We had a short presentation from Luke Plant, the level design director from Ubisoft Quebec, who I actually got to interview as well. More on that in a little bit. And then we played through the prologue intro of the game. And after that, we were dropped into a save file much later in the story so we could experience the open world area around Harima. And so you could see Naoe and Yasuke working together and sort of the game as a whole. I assassinated, I ran through some doors, I petted some dogs, I drew some pictures, I did some parkour, everything you would expect in an Assassin's Creed game.
You are a friendly beast, are you not?
Despite the Ubisoft open world label that's typically used as like a derogatory term, I like Ubisoft open worlds. But what I really learnt while playing Assassin's Creed Shadows is I need something fresh and unique with these Ubisoft open worlds to really pull me into them. I think back to, say, Star Wars Outlaws, and that being the Star Wars aesthetic, which was pulled off so well there, and also having Nyx as a unique way to play around and interact with that world. Or even Avatar and the in-depth nature of all the fauna and flora in that game and how all the animals interact, and you can sort of learn more about them and that ecosystem that they live in. Adds a unique spin on that Ubisoft open world. Whereas here, it is what you would expect from an Assassin's Creed game. You know, there wasn't really anything that felt substantially brand new to me, which, you know, I enjoy exploring here and finding little things to tick off and discovering secrets in the world. I did also like that Naoe and Yasuke can both like sneak up on animals and you can draw them in like their natural habitat. There was like a cute little way to like break up some of the game flow, and I like these quieter moments and seeing them interact. It is a little strange though that both the protagonists are like professional drawers. I feel like maybe one of them should and one should be like really bad, or, you know, it seems strange that they're both like really good at drawing. But anyway, this being the first true next-gen Assassin's Creed has been a major selling point, and you can feel that in the density of the environments, especially the particle effects, the way NPCs are moving around, and a lot of the lighting at night. There is a really strong atmospheric nature to this world that is definitely beautiful to look at. It's the best looking Assassin's Creed game that you will have ever played, even if at times, sometimes the night is a little dark, but I'm sure that's just like a setting thing that I can like crank the brightness up. Holistically, wandering around this area and clearing out a couple of enemy territories, collecting some resources, finding some gear chests, and progressing our main mission for the session, which was to find a noble and assassinate them. We didn't know who the noble was and needed to use the new scout mechanic, where you have these scouts that are like hired out from your hideout to scout various sections of the map. So you can bring up the map and scout an area. This will give you more information about the locations in that area, as well as where to exactly find those certain objectives. This feels like an extension on Ubisoft's like exploration modes that these games typically have, where you can either choose for quest markers to either take you exactly to where you need to go, or require some exploration where they say like, oh, it's in the northwestish area in this sort of location. Now, the extension here is that if you have a rough idea of where that is, you can then use the scout mechanic to give you that exact mission objective as to where that is. Now, you don't necessarily need to. I tried both using the scout mechanic and not using it and just using my intuition. Both are completely achievable, though I feel like there should be a bit more to this system than what we're shown, as it doesn't really seem to serve an explicit purpose, right? Like, it does tell you in the quest description, like, it's over in this location, it's in a temple, it's whatever, right? I was able to just use like my brain power as I can with other games to just go over there and figure it out. Whereas maybe if you can't, then you've got the scout mechanic, but then also you could just change it in the settings in the previous titles. So I think we need to see more of this, especially more of the hideout system in general, which we didn't actually get to see any of in our preview build, which I was a little disappointed about. I did actually ask Luke about this in our interview, and so I'll have a bit more information for you with that video when that interview video comes out. But I was disappointed we didn't get to see exactly how the hideout stuff actually works and integrates with the game, as I think that's where some of that unique nature to the open world will come from. So it's disappointing we didn't get to see that. A couple of things to note though before we move on to combat is there is like a canon mode, which means that dialogue decisions are made for you. So I don't know if that means that there's actual legitimate choice and consequence, and turning on the canon mode will just make the like historical choices for you, or if it just means it removes the dialogue choices. That's something that we will need to see more of. And there is an immersive mode as well, which has Japanese voiceover with English subtitles, which I didn't actually play on. I just played on the English VO. We did experience a bit of the new Animus and how that's going to work, or what I guess is like the Assassin's Creed Infinity thing. Basically, with the new Animus themed main menu, you get to boot into that, and there are like these memories, which is essentially just like the games of everything from Origins onwards, and then you select which one you want, and then it like boots you into that. I'm not sure what the overall Animus or modern day story will be here. There was some interesting voiceover and things that we did get to hear, so I'm a little bit curious about exactly what that leads to, but we don't really know rightly at this moment, so it's hard to comment. All right, combat. Combat feels drastically different between Yasuke and Naoe. So we'll split this into two sections, and we'll cover Yasuke Combat here, and then we'll talk about Naoe and Stealth. So Yasuke is a big brute of a man that somehow can still climb buildings and do a little bit of basic parkour in all that armor, can also swim for some reason. I don't know how he doesn't fall through the roof, but Yasuke is very much an in-your-face fighter with a much more versatile weapon kit compared to Naoe. So you've got ranged weapons here being a gun or a bow, and then for melee, you've got a long katana, naginata, and a kanobo. Now, all of these also have their own specific skill trees as well, and their own abilities. Now, you can have active 2 weapons at a time, so theoretically, you're probably going to want to have like 1 ranged and 1 melee weapon active at a time. Now, Yasuke can do a brutal assassination as one of his skills that can be unlocked, but it doesn't have like the finesse or the stealthy animations that Naoe does, as he does make noise when he does these. In standard combat, I enjoyed playing as Yasuke, as his damage against elites and normal enemies is very high and strong, and parrying here feels good to like break down an enemy's armor and then follow up with those big hits and deal damage. Though I did feel that in some encounters, especially with multiple enemies around you, that the HP on these enemies was a little too high, and enemies struggle to have like a good attack pattern or flow that then allows you to say parry, parry, attack, attack, and like get that nice flow happening in combat. Because of this, I felt myself leaning on the skills to try and rip through as much of a health bar as I could to take out those enemies quickly, so then I could actually focus on just like playing the general like combat rock, paper, scissors. Like there's an effect where say blunt weapons and slash weapons do more or less damage depending on the type of armor that the enemies are wearing. Would really like if this was visually reflected on screen in a meaningful way, as it doesn't appear to be currently. I would have liked some sort of indication that my damage numbers were lower or higher with this weapon against this enemy type. However, an issue with this system for both Yasuke and Naoe really is that you can only have 2 weapons equipped at once, right? So with Yasuke, that basically means you're going to want to have a melee weapon, say a long katana, and then a ranged weapon like the bow. Now, it seems counterintuitive to have this like rock, paper, scissors like mechanic for damage type if I can only have 1 melee weapon equipped at a time, or theoretically up to 2, but then I'm just straight up not having a ranged weapon equipped. Like the concept of this system is great, but if I've only got 1 melee weapon equipped and I can't immediately switch to a better weapon for this specific enemy type and then switch back, and it loses that flow and that ingenuity feeling. And I feel that Yasuke, being the giant that he is, should be able to equip more than 2 weapons at once, right? I don't see why we can't have, say, the long katana and then one other melee weapon and then the ranged weapon equip, right? He is this giant brute of a man that has, like, you know, all this armor and everything on it. Would make sense as part of his archetype and that samurai archetype and that feeling that Ubisoft are going for, that he would be able to equip more weapons than Naoe would be able to, and then you can lean into that combat system and that blunt versus slash weapons a little bit further and feeling how that difference feels. But the combat with Yasuke specifically does have such a nice weight and feeling to when you smack enemies with big weapons, and you can feel that strength and that brutality that he brings to the combat encounters. That is very strong, and I do quite like that. Conversely, let's talk about Naoe. So modernized stealth is the new buzzword that Ubisoft are using here. Now, this encompasses the changes that they've made to stealth with Assassin's Creed Shadows compared to, say, Mirage, Valhalla, etc. Namely, this means a change to how lighting impacts stealth, also being able to prone, and the new servants. So in AC Shadows, you can now prone at any time to make yourself harder to spot, like, say, proning on grass or on rooftops, so you can sort of like look over the lip. I didn't see any areas that were only accessible via prone, except for one specific location that was like a linear bit in like the main story bit. I do hope there are more hidden pathways that really use this mechanic, like the world is built out to have these areas you can only access via prone. The lighting change here is an interesting one for sure. Now, you have this new eyeball indicator when you're in stealth that shows how visible you are based on how much light is actually on you. This is a really cool idea. My issue here is that the enemy density or placement isn't high enough for it to actually matter in a really meaningful, tangible way that you need to use that light to avoid enemies. As I really just ignored it and played the game how I would typically play an Assassin's Creed game, you know, you're doing the parkouring across the roofs and you're jumping down and doing some assassinations, blah, blah, blah. The lighting never really played into that because these camps are set up in such a large area and the enemy density isn't deep enough, nor are the visibility cones large enough to really compensate for the fact that lighting should be included here. And that's a little bit disappointing, as I feel like this mechanic could be really pushed just that touch further to actually be something useful, right? Put more enemies in these camps, massively increase their visibility cones, and make their AI a lot smarter so they can actually see super clearly and super far. If you are standing in light, they should be able to see you from miles away, right? Make that much more noticeable, and then the lighting mechanics that you've really baked into this game will become much more important for Naoe to actually be bothered to go and destroy these lights and take her time to do that. Whereas it just did not matter enough because the enemies weren't even congregating near the lights, or there weren't enough lights across the board for it to actually matter that I was going to be seen in those lights. The servants, however, I did actually find did change up my stealth gameplay a little bit, as I didn't particularly feel like just assassinating a servant that's, you know, just cleaning or doing some gardening. You know, I felt that felt a little bad. So in those instances, you either want to avoid them, or what I did was grab them and knock them out rather than just brutally assassinating them, because they're just doing their job, right? And I did like how that changed up the game flow. Now, assassinating and stealthing and using the hidden blade, parkour on rooftops, that concept alone has made Ubisoft a ton of money, and it's still a ton of fun here. So, you know, that's not necessarily a bad thing either. I just think that you can tune up these new systems a little bit further to make them much more impactful, to really modernize stealth as they are trying to do. What's unique about Naoe's stealth ability here is that she does move significantly faster than Yasuke. I believe she is the fastest moving assassin to date, but she also has access to a grappling hook, which allows her to climb to additional heights, so you can get much higher on buildings with ease, which is something that Yasuke can't do. And then just her general movement and parkouring is significantly faster than Yasuke, so she has much more benefit to doing stealth. And she has access to eagle vision, which allows you to see enemies and interactable objects through walls. Now, both protagonists have like an observe mechanic where you can like zoom in a little bit and like mark enemies, but it doesn't have that eagle vision effect that Naoe exclusively has. The speed at which Naoe moves, the grappling hook, plus this eagle vision almost deters you from playing as Yasuke in the open world because of how good the movement and speed of Naoe is. I instantly gravitated to her because you can then get on these extra high grounds and move around much faster, and it feels like an Assassin's Creed game rather than something else, and I significantly gravitated towards Naoe because of this. Conversely, it didn't feel like, or I didn't find any areas that only Yasuke could access, where there are areas that only Naoe can access because of the grappling hook as she can get up higher, whereas I didn't find anything that, say, there was a wall or something that Yasuke needed to like charge through that Naoe like couldn't access, something like that. So you're almost de-incentivized to play as Yasuke in the open world and really only use him for fighting mano-a-mano in those big actual fight encounters, because using Naoe is definitely a struggle. Now, in straight up combat, Naoe has access to a short katana, Kusarigama, probably pronouncing that terribly wrong, apologies, and the Tanto, which is just like a little dagger thing. And then for a ranged weapon, she doesn't have a typical ranged weapon. She has assassin tools like the kunai, the smoke bomb, the bell alarm, and the shuriken. Now, Naoe's damage numbers are significantly lower than Yasuke's, and she also doesn't stagger enemies like Yasuke does. So having a low amount of health and doing significantly less damage, you're probably going to miss parry timings with Naoe as well that feel much more impactful than when you miss them with Yasuke. It's very easy to die, and I did multiple times with Naoe. And because of this, I did lean into the new ally summoning mechanic for assistance with Naoe. So what this is in combat, you can summon allies that you've met in the world and that have joined your cause and that will typically hang out at your hideout. You can summon them for a period of time to help you in combat. Now, speaking with Luke in our interview, he mentioned that these are like actual NPCs. They need to be recruited first and brought to your hideout. So they do operate a little bit different to scouts, and something that I did ask Luke in our interview as well was, say, for example, if I'm playing as Naoe, would I be able to summon Yasuke to help me in combat or vice versa? And unfortunately, the answer was no. Now, while both characters share resources, they each have their own armor, weapons, skills, and like everything in between. Now, I will have a video going out breaking down this in detail, like their different skills and the whole armor thing and everything. But what this means is that you'll need to focus on both their gear progressions separately, especially if you want to play both of them. Now, the mastery points and the skill points here that you obtain will be obtained for both of them and then spent individually, so you don't have to level them up individually, but you'll then spend the points individually in their various skill trees, and the higher levels of the skill trees are unlocked via the knowledge rank system, and you gain knowledge rank via completing like main quests and also like praying at temples and things in the open world. I am genuinely curious to see what you guys think about this, and I would love for you to let me know in the comments down below. I think it makes sense to have each character feel unique and have these completely unique kits from their weapons to their ranged options as well, but this will mean that you'll need to progress them both individually. And say if you, like for example, you want to play as Naoe 85-90% of the time, will it get annoying to find gear for Yasuke 50% of the time? Or what is that gear split? You know, I'm very interested to know how exactly that works, and it is a question that I did leave for Ubisoft, which I will let you guys know once I do have a specific answer, but it is something that is on my mind as to having to find gear and progress two different characters, especially if I only want to play one of them almost exclusively. Interested to see how that actually works.
Run to the Kufu, the mountain. The door will open. To this blade is a key.
What?
Inside the coffin is a box. Protect it with your life.
父上!
You said you wanted help. Now,
He kidnapped his own son.
The attack at the Rengakai was aimed at me.
With Hideye caught in the middle.
He has stationed a private force at Imeji Castle. A backup plan for a meeting he never planned to attend.
Feudal Japan is the setting here, starting in 1579. Now, Yasuke was the first character you were introduced to at the very start of the game. I was not a fan of this initial intro sequence with Yasuke. I felt no connection to him as a character or interested in his journey. He basically rocks up in Japan, and then because of events that transpire, you end up working for a lord, and there's a 6-month time jump, and then everything kind of goes wrong for Yasuke, which by the way feels a little weird that Yasuke arrives in Japan and then 6 months later he's basically a professional samurai by trade. I feel like you need a little bit more training than that. Now, Naoe, on the other hand, feels like the star of the show here. Like, just completely, as soon as I started playing as her in the prologue, I was significantly more interested in not only her journey and her story, but in what they were doing with these characters. Now, her intro, without spoiling anything, is very impactful and meaningful and has a clear hook as to why she is going on this journey throughout this game. Now, unfortunately, Yasuke and Naoe, at least in our preview, they don't interact with each other directly in any meaningful way that made me think, okay, the decision to have two protagonists here was the right one. Yasuke feels very much like an empty vessel of muscle, while all the emotional impact and character moments seem to come from Naoe. The only time that they really interact in the preview directly with the two of them is like in-world, like meta-breaking stuff where they're just like talking about who you're going to play as next. Like, oh man, I'm a big strong dude, like we should totally go in, like, you know, swords blazing here. And Naoe's like, nah, let's like do stealth and I'll like sneak around the roof. And it's just like pointless dialogue where it's just like, who are you going to play as? Like, it doesn't add anything to the characters. And what I also found disappointing about those interactions as well is the camaraderie between them. So when you say pick playing as Naoe, right, Yasuke just like poof and disappears. And you know, the headcanon there and talking to Luke in our interview as well is that he is off like doing something, you know, to help progress the main mission. But when you're actually playing as Naoe, or Yasuke, you don't actually see the other person doing their thing. And I would really like it if in world you can actually see your companion here go off and do something and actually participate in this journey. It feels very jarring that you're playing as Naoe or Yasuke and you go off and you do whatever the mission objective is, and then all of a sudden they just appear in that cutscene, and then at the end of that cutscene you choose to either play as Yasuke or Naoe, the other one just completely disappears until that next cutscene. There should be something there where you can see, okay, like, all right, I chose to play as Naoe, cool. I'm going to go and like stealth across these rooftops, and Yasuke is like, tight, I'm going to go and beat up some dudes over here. And you can actually see him in world, like walk over there and do that. The camaraderie and the purpose of having these two characters that are supposed to feel completely unique to each other and their individual relationships with each other and the other characters, I just didn't feel we got enough of that in the preview. This is something that does need an entire game to develop, right? We never saw that point where Yasuke and Naoe actually met, so we don't have a real clear understanding of what their relationship is, especially at this point in the story. Like, they're clearly just working together in like perfect harmony. Is that consistent throughout the game? Is that just at that point when we played? There's a lot of questions that I have about the story and the reason for having these two characters being completely separate, but also being the two protagonists for this game that I didn't really get a chance to play around with. And it's definitely something that's on my mind for once we do have access to the full game.
Commander Tokube is nowhere to be found.
His body was not found among the dead.
No, my lord. All casualties have been accounted for.
Overall, I'm left with a pretty mild feeling about Assassin's Creed Shadows. Nothing I played or experienced here was bad or of particularly low quality. Everything felt like quite a solid Assassin's Creed experience. It's just that if you're touting this as the first true next-gen Assassin's Creed game, I was really expecting something new or interesting to change up this formula. And while there is some of that to be found in the modernized stealth, or you could say in the two protagonist experience, I'm just not sure exactly where that hook is going to come from. And it is something that I will be definitely paying attention to with the full game once I do get my hands on it. And I am interested to play more, right? I do enjoy Assassin's Creed games and stealthing around and doing the parkour and assassinating people. I'm excited to explore feudal Japan and fighting face to face with Yasuke and like the brutality of it, and then stealthing around the shadows with Naoe and systematically clearing out enemies. That I am really interested to do, but really it's the story and the writing and everything surrounding those that I'm kind of worried about. And especially if this is going to be a 50 to 60 hour game as well, which we don't 100% know the length yet. Can that be really engaging for the whole time? It's an issue that we've struggled with in some of these longer Assassin's Creed experiences we've been getting in recent years. No real bugs in the preview either, a couple of hairy FPS drops and performance issues, but that's totally common for preview builds. So I wouldn't call too much attention to it at this point, but definitely something I'm paying attention to for the full game. I think ultimately what I'm left with is quite a high amount of intrigue to play more, but also some significant doubts around some of the choices that were made here around having these two unique characters and how they're going to play off each other. Furthermore, a lot of writing on this for Ubisoft. Like, it's evident with how they keep pushing back this release date and trying to drum up positive word, which is their right to do as a publisher, right? That's literally marketing. That's what you do. However, for a game that feels like the future of Ubisoft and thousands of people's jobs are riding on it, I'm not sure that this assassin can step out of the shadows. I've got more content coming for Assassin's Creed Shadows, so make sure you like and subscribe, do all that good stuff, and let me know any questions you have in the comments down below, and I'll get back to you. Thank you guys for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is NorZZa, and I hope you have a great day.